Hello, welcome to day 5 of Hope Daily, and we've been looking each day at lessons learned along the way, using Abraham as a model for us, as a pilgrim who followed God in faith, and as an inspiration to us as we prepare for a week of mission in Holy Week just next week. Well, if you've been tuning in each day, you'll know that on Tuesday we looked at Live for Free. On Wednesday, we looked at Live by Faith. Thursday, we looked at Live as a Sojourner, a temporary resident. Friday, we looked at Live in Hope. And today, Saturday, we conclude with Live with Longing. Well, doing the Camino was like doing a life in miniature. These 125 miles that I just did last week in northern Spain. It was like a life in miniature because we had 4 seasons in 1 week. We had everything from rain and amazing sunshine, a bit of spring thrown in. Most mornings, it's like normal life because most mornings I didn't want to get up, but I was so glad when I did. And also it was a good job I didn't live by my emotions because they aren't they, a most unreliable guide. So when I started the Camino, I was thinking to myself, can I do this? What am I doing? What have I embarked upon? Why am I putting myself through this? And then a little bit in the middle of the Camino, I thought to myself, I just don't want this to end. I love this. I want to go on these long walks forever. I was addicted to it. I really liked it. But then that waned, and towards the end, I was thinking to myself, I'm so pleased that I've done this, but I'll be so glad when it ends. I'm longing to get to the city, the Cathedral of St. James in Santiago de Compostela. So it was longing for the city of Santiago de Compostela that kept me going. It was the promise of a posh hotel. Me and my 2 compatriots, we promised, rather than stay in some of the pilgrim hostels, some of which didn't have heating. I remember nearly getting hypothermia one night. Instead of staying in the very Spartan and basic pilgrim hostels, we treat ourselves to a posh hotel when we got to the city with a pool and a sauna. Well, when we got to the city, we never actually did that in the end, but never mind, it kept us going. Well, Hebrews 11 verse 16 says of Abraham, indeed all of the people of faith that the chapter mentioned, it says they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Well, the city of God, it's a picture image in the Bible of heaven, the place where God dwells in fullness. The city of God was the name of St. Augustine's famous book written in the year 426. The Romans had been humbled because they'd been sacked by the Visigoths in 410. And some were saying that the empire had been left in ruin because it had ditched paganism in favour of Christianity when the whole empire had converted under the Emperor Constantine. But no, said St. Augustine, this wasn't the case, because what Christianity teaches us is that we look to a heavenly city, not an earthly one. Christianity, he said, was about spiritual power, not about worldly power. It's about the mystical, not about the political. And one of my favourite prayers in the whole world is St. Augustine's famous prayer when he said this: God, he said, our hearts are restless until they find their rest in thee. One of the things that will stick with me in the Camino forever, I think, is meeting and talking to a couple from Northern Europe who are in their late 50s. These 2 were seekers. They were spiritual and not religious. They'd been turned off institutional religion and organised religion and drawn a little bit into Eastern philosophy and thinking, a little bit into New Age thinking. And they were surprised when I first got talking to them. And I said this, they saw my clerical collar, realised I was an ordained minister. And they confessed to me later that wasn't immediately attractive to them, quite the opposite. And I said this, I said, I hate religion Jesus came to put religion to death. Well, this started a long conversation with the couple, and I answered many of his questions in particular. And at the end of this kind of class in apologetics, it was really, I said to them, do you want to become a Christian? And they said that they did. And it was my privilege to baptize them both in a bar. Later we had Holy Communion together in the midst of a picnic that we shared, and it was all deeply moving. They cried and I ended up crying too. It was a sense of, for both of them, of a homecoming, them coming home. Christ had fulfilled the longing of their hearts and their searching. We are called as God's pilgrim people to be a people who long for him. O God, our hearts are restless until they find their rest in thee. So my prayer for each one of us at the end of these 5 devotionals is that God, if it's left us for whatever reason, God might restore that longing in us. Paul says in 2 Timothy 4 verse 8, he said, there awaits for me a crown of righteousness, and not just for me, he says, but for all who have longed for his appearing. It's the language of love sickness, isn't it? It's the language of being in love. And of course, when it comes to mission, we can't give away what we haven't got unless we are deeply in love with Jesus Christ. It's very difficult for us to commend him to others, to point him to others. And so that's my prayer for each one of us, my prayer for myself as I prepare to fly home and then come up to Lancaster, my home city, that I may have a longing for the Lord, a longing for the King and for his kingdom, that in my preaching, in my witnessing, I might authentically be able to point others to him, that they too might be able to find their home in him, this sense of homecoming, coming home to the God that they never knew, but finding their rest in him and him alone. Amen.